to be here with you all and present the CPACE program. That is a great opportunity and initiative, and if you can take advantage of it, because it can finance your energy efficiency projects, solar panels, and to have a better clean environment, and you can have it 100% finance, no down payments like we had in the title. And now I would like to introduce Tracy Phillips from the CPACE organization, who is going to provide you more information about it. And Tracy, you have the room. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Bernice. And thanks for inviting me and for joining me today, everyone. So as Bernice mentioned, I'm going to be talking today about the Commercial Property Assessed Clean Energy, or CPACE program. So without further ado, the program it's a statewide program, and it was designed to help finance energy efficiency, renewable energy, and water conservation projects, as well as to help finance efficient new construction projects. The program, when it was created, there was a statewide district enabled by the Colorado legislation. So the program covers the entire state of Colorado, but each county needs to opt in to the district before we can start financing projects within that county. And I'll talk more about that. The program and all of the projects are all financed through private capital. So there's no federal money or state money or grants or bonds that are used to finance the projects or the program. It's all private capital. And the program is sponsored by the New Energy Improvement District, or NEID for short. So that board is made up of 7 volunteers that are appointed by the governor, with Jeffrey King, who is with the Colorado Energy Office. He's the chair of that board. So what is CPACE, or Property Assessed Clean Energy? So there are different ways that owners can finance improvement projects for their building, right? They may use be a self-funded project, or perhaps a traditional loan. CPACE was created to offer building owners and developers a different way, unique way of financing these improvement projects. So there are 3 components to CPACE that make it very different than other forms of financing. So the first is it's 100% financing. It'll cover all of the hard costs and all the soft costs related to a project. The second is it's long-term financing. So you can finance these projects up to 25 years. So that right there is very different than traditional financing, right? A traditional loan might be, say, 20 to 30% out of pocket, and you finance it for 5 to 7 years. So this is no out of pocket, and finance it long-term up to 25 years. And then the third piece that really makes CPACE different is it's a special purpose assessment that's placed on the property. It's the same as, say, like a sewer assessment or a sidewalk assessment. So these are different assessments that can be placed on a property by the county to help with public projects. CPACE uses the same mechanism, and the reason it's done that way is, as an assessment on the property, the owner will make their payments through their property tax bill. So the CPACE assessment becomes a new line item on the building owner's tax bill, and that's how they'll make their payments. As an assessment on the property, then the financing stays with the building. So if the building owner were to sell the building down the road, they can hand off future payments to the next owner. The other nice thing about it being an assessment on the property, it's underwritten primarily by the building itself. So it's non-recourse, there are no personal guarantees. Essentially, the financing is attached to the building and not the business or the building owner. A lot of these projects are designed so that the energy savings will outweigh the CPACE payments. And a lot of projects will strive for that, but it's not a requirement. So in other words, you can have a project financed through CPACE and the energy savings are there, but they don't outweigh the payments. And that's okay. And that really opens up CPACE to a lot of different types of improvements that, save energy, but don't necessarily pay for themselves through those energy savings anytime soon, like a roof replacement or window replacement project. They'll save energy, but just the cost of those improvements are very large compared to the energy cost savings that you might get. So the savings aren't going to necessarily outweigh the payments, but it's still eligible. Speaking of eligibility, the C in CPACE stands for commercial. So any commercial, industrial, or agricultural building is eligible for financing. That includes nonprofits. People always ask me, they say, well, nonprofits don't pay property taxes, so how does this work for them? Well, nonprofits can have assessments placed on them just like everybody else. So nonprofits are absolutely eligible. And in fact, we've done quite a few projects that involve nonprofits, and I'm going to show you a few at the end of this presentation. And multifamily, if it's 5 or more units, it's considered commercial multifamily. So that would be eligible for financing. So things like an apartment complex would be a great candidate for CPACE financing. And then anything with a utility cost savings is eligible for financing. So any kind of improvement like replacing your heating and cooling equipment or new controls, replacing the domestic hot water heaters, new lighting, anything to do with the envelope, like I mentioned, a new roof, new windows, as well as any renewable energy improvement, right? Like a solar PV system, and any water conservation improvement. So anything that reduces the water bill, things like new plumbing fixtures would be eligible for financing. Not only are the improvements eligible for financing, but anything related to the improvements or the project is also eligible for financing. So if you have to do like an engineering design study or architectural design, those costs can be included, or an energy audit, those costs can be included as well. So any soft costs related to the project is eligible, and any hard costs related to the improvements are also eligible. So say you had to do structural upgrades to the building to support a new solar PV system, the cost of that structural upgrade would be eligible. Or if you had to do an electrical upgrade or replace the transformers related to a new lighting system or a new solar PV system, those costs are eligible. So it's truly meant to be 100% financing, no out of pocket to a building owner. So Susan, I think you're going to mention a few things about the Efficiency Works.
Yes, thanks, Tracy. So I'm Susan Bartlett. I'm with Longmont Power and Communications. And as Tracy is talking about a lot of these eligible projects, I just wanted to let everyone know that some of these projects may also be eligible for utility rebates in Longmont through Efficiency Works. So be sure to check in with Efficiency Works or with us here at Longmont Power and Communications as you're planning your work. Efficiency Works offers energy advising and assessments, as well as equipment upgrade rebates, like the ones that are listed here, including some new water rebates. Tracy mentioned that you can also do water equipment as part of your project. And that's for existing buildings. Efficiency Works also has a new construction option that covers things like above code lighting, insulation and windows, and Energy Star service and grocery equipment. So I just want to have it be a reminder that I want you to be able to take advantage of all the resources that are available to you, including CPACE, as you're planning out your project. And I'll pass it back to Tracy to talk a little bit more about new construction.
Yep, that's great. Thank you, Susan. And yeah, so speaking of new construction, so far I've been talking about using CPACE financing for improvement projects on existing buildings. There's also this component to CPACE where a developer can finance between 15 to 20% of the total construction cost through CPACE, as long as the building either meets or exceeds the 2015 Energy Code. So if a building owner or developer is building their building to meet the 2015 Energy Code, then they're eligible for 15% of the total construction cost through CPACE. And if the project's going to exceed the 2015 Energy Code by at least 5% in terms of energy performance, then the project qualifies for up to 20%. And so why is that important to a developer? So if you look on the left, this is an example of a capital stack. So when a developer is putting together the financing for their project, usually the bulk of that financing will come in the form of a construction loan. So say somewhere between 60 and 75% of the financing would come from a construction loan. But then the rest of the financing needs to come from other sources, right? It could be a mezzanine loan, it could be owner's equity, it could be other sources of financing. But those other forms of financing tend to be higher risk, and so they come with a higher interest rate, say anywhere between 9% and 20% interest rate. So the idea is if you can have CPACE replace your mezzanine loan or portion of your owner's equity or some other form of financing, CPACE typically comes in around 5 to 6% interest rate money. So you're replacing money that's 9 to 20% interest rate. This can be very powerful to a developer. To give you a little more background about CPACE in general, so CPACE was not created here in Colorado, right? It actually was created in California, and it now covers 24 different states that have active CPACE programs. Over the last decade, there's been over 2,500 buildings that have used CPACE financing and over $2 billion used in CPACE financing across the country. So there's a lot of precedent for CPACE financing. Specific to Colorado, I mentioned that each county needs to opt into the program before we can start financing projects. So I know the folks in Longmont, right? You're located in Boulder County, as am I. So obviously that county, you can see a green there, is participating. So all those projects would be eligible. If you do work in other counties across the state or own properties in other counties, this is sort of the list. The ones that are in green, these 36 counties are currently participating. So you can use CPACE for projects in any of those counties. If you are interested in doing a project in a county that's not participating yet, many of them I'm in discussion with. So you could just reach out to me and let me know if you have a project that's interested in potentially using CPACE. That's usually a great way for me to go talk to the county commissioners about participation. So that'll help the conversation. So just reach out to me if you're thinking about a project in these other counties. I wanted to talk about the potential that a typical building will have in terms of cost savings and the other benefits. So these are some data from a report done by the Rocky Mountain Institute, which is in Boulder. They released this report back in February of last year. And the report showed that your typical building has the potential to save 15% or more on their utility costs just from doing what they call low cost and no cost improvements. So that's sort of just tuning the building up. Then if you're looking at capital improvements, which is replacing equipment, you're looking at savings 35% or more on average. And that's really where CPACE fits in, right? When you need to start replacing equipment or adding equipment to a building. So to a building owner, these projects will typically translate to a net operating income or NOI increase between 2.4 and 5.6%. So this building owners love their net operating income going up. So that's really music to their ears. One of the other benefits financially to a building owner is these projects will typically result in the value of the property going up between $5 and $11 a square foot. So again, this could be very compelling to a building owner. On, say, a 50,000 square foot building, this can mean the value of that property going up between $250,000 and $500,000. So I know a lot of buildings are not big buildings, right? They tend to be what we call small and medium buildings. And these buildings can have some unique challenges to them. One in particular is the lean to value, meaning that, and I'll talk more about this, but typically a building can get between 20 and 30% of its value in CPACE financing. So what does that mean? Well, it means that if a building's worth less than $300,000, it's not usually a good candidate for CPACE financing. So if it is worth less than that, then we'd have to talk to you about potentially other options for the building. But otherwise, $300,000 or more, you're a good candidate. And then underwriting for these projects can be a challenge too. Sometimes they can be difficult to underwrite. But we have a very large pool of capital providers. These are the organizations, the banks, the credit unions that are financing these projects. And because we have such a large pool of them, there tends to be a better chance that there's a capital provider out there that can underwrite a project. So, and we continue to add to this pool. So that's really helped us address this small and medium building market. Some other challenges are, I'm sorry, I already covered this. So another financing source that's looking to work with CPACE is something called the Colorado Clean Energy Fund. So this is a fund that's being developed here in Colorado. They're looking to launch in the third quarter of this year. So that'd be sometime in July. And this is being specifically designed to help finance smaller projects. So what does smaller mean? Well, in the CPACE world, usually a project that's $250,000 or more, you're going to have plenty of folks that want to finance that through CPACE. When you get under $250,000, there's still banks out there that could potentially finance that project, but not as many. And so this fund is being developed to really help address that market to finance these smaller projects. And the way they work is they finance a bunch of smaller projects, and then once they have enough volume, they'll sell that group of projects, the financing for them, to a financial institution, which those proceeds will then go back to continue to feed the fund so that they can finance more projects. So if you do have a smaller building or a smaller project in mind, there's a good chance we can already get you financing through CPACE. But if not, like I said, in July, this new Green Bank should be able to help address those. One of the tools that we have to help specifically with solar projects is called the PaceWorks Solar Project Estimator. So if you go to our program website, copace.com, you can access this tool. And so if you're looking to do a solar project in particular, you can use this tool. It'll help you estimate what the solar production is going to be, what the cost savings are going to be, but then even more importantly, financially, what is the project going to look like if you finance it through CPACE? We also have another tool on our website, and it's called EPIC, the Energy Performance Improvement Calculator. So this is another tool developed to help originate projects. And whereas the previous one was designed for solar projects, this is basically designed for everything else. So if you want to look at what is a project going to look like in terms of the energy cost and cost savings, and how much is it going to cost if you do things like replacing your HVAC equipment or new controls or a lighting retrofit or these types of improvements, you can use the EPIC tool to perform that analysis. And then again, it has a financial component. So then once you've entered this into the platform, you can take a look and see what is it going to look like if you finance this project, say with a traditional loan versus a CPACE loan. How is that going to look financially? So if you're interested in using this tool, let me know, and I can talk to you more about it afterward. So because CPACE uses this assessment that's placed on the property, the assessment takes priority ahead of the mortgage. So if you have a building with a mortgage on it, then we need to have a conversation with the mortgage holder to talk to them about providing consent. So what does that mean? Well, because the mortgage, the CPACE assessment takes priority, the mortgage holder is essentially subordinating to that CPACE assessment. And so that might sound scary, right? And some mortgage holders may have a negative knee-jerk reaction to that. But there are benefits to the owner using CPACE financing that we explain to the mortgage holder. So in the bottom half of my slide, this is what we'll talk to the mortgage holder about. The fact that these projects will typically result in an improved net operating income, right? So better cash flow for the owner, which translates into their ability to pay their mortgage, right? And so banks like that. They like, again, just like the owner, the banks like the NOI going up. And these projects will result in an increase in the building's property value, which is the bank's collateral, right? So again, the bank likes that a lot. The other question the mortgage holder wants to talk about is, well, what happens in a default scenario? What happens if the owner doesn't make their CPACE payments? The key there is that the CPACE assessment does not accelerate, meaning it doesn't come due. So it rides with the building. It'll just stay with the building until somebody makes it whole again and pays those past payments, so CPACE payments that were due. So that risk, really what the bank is subordinating to, is simply those 1 or 2 or 3 years worth of payments that may be in arrears. And so that risk is very low to a mortgage holder. So usually when we explain these to a mortgage holder, they're willing to provide consent in many cases. And here in Colorado, we've actually had 34 different banks, different mortgage holders that have provided consent on CPACE projects. So the great thing is if this is these are one of your mortgage holders, then they're already familiar with CPACE. So when we go to talk to them about mortgage holder consent, there's a really good chance that they've heard of it and they're going to be open to providing consent. The same goes for new construction projects. There have been 22 different construction lenders that have provided consent on CPACE projects, on new construction projects. So again, these are institutions that are familiar with CPACE and have provided consent in the past. In terms of the capital provider, these are the folks that are financing the projects through CPACE. And when they do their underwriting, there are 2 metrics that they'll look at. They may have other things to look at as well, but these are the 2 main ones. The one is the loan to value. So usually if the loan to value of a building is 80% or less, then it's a good candidate for CPACE financing. So in other words, if I had $1 million building and a $600,000 mortgage on that building, that's a 60% loan to value. So that'd be a great candidate for CPACE financing. And that less than 80%, that's not a rule. It's more of a rule of thumb. It's what capital providers usually like to see. But you can have a loan to value higher than that and still have it be a good candidate for CPACE. And then the other piece is, well, how much financing can a building get? It's usually about 20% of the building's value. So if I have a building worth $1 million, then they're typically looking about $200,000 in available financing through CPACE. Again, that's not a rule. I've seen that as high as 30%, but 20% is a good number to use. And in terms of capital providers, we currently have 40 different capital providers that are financing these projects. So these are different banks and credit unions and other financial organizations, and they essentially compete to finance these projects. So once we have a project developed and we know how much the owner is looking to finance, then they can tap into this pool of capital providers to provide them with term sheets, which they can then review and then select which capital provider they'd like to use. So here in Colorado, these are the types of projects that have been financed. So over on the left are the dollars finance. And you can see in terms of dollars finance, new construction is really dominant. Over on the right are by number of projects. So you can see energy efficiency projects are about half, a little under half of the projects that have been done, with the balance being a quarter of it with new construction and the rest either renewable energy by itself or renewable energy combined with other energy efficiency projects. And here's what the program has done to date in Colorado. So we have financed 91 projects, a little almost up to $143 million in financing. The smallest project that we financed to date is $60,000, and the largest was actually right here in Boulder County. It closed last week, and it was just under $30 million. Of those 91 projects, 24 of them have been new construction projects. So that's really a growing market. And like I said, that's where a lot of the big dollar projects tend to happen. So I've got a few case studies I'm going to show you to give you sort of a sense of the types of projects that are being financed using CPACE. So this is a building owner that used $331,000 in CPACE financing to finance a 100 kilowatt solar PV system and to replace all the lighting. The thing I'd like to mention, a couple of things about this building. The one is the owner considered financing the roof replacement along with the solar and the lighting, but they decided to finance it separately. So you can always do that. You can always sort of mix and match. You don't have to finance everything through CPACE if you don't want to. The other thing to mention about this building is there were 7 tenants in the building, and one of them was a cannabis grower. So anything to do with cannabis is not eligible for financing through CPACE. So what we did on this project was they used the CPACE money to finance the solar and the lighting for 6 of the 7 tenants and sort of left the cannabis grower out of the project. So there are ways you can sort of navigate around that scenario. But in general, if you have a building or a business that's involved with cannabis, it's not eligible. And building size really doesn't matter. This is an example. This is a project right here in Lafayette. This was a dry cleaners. They had a 4,000 square foot building, and they used $125,000 in CPACE to install a 46 kilowatt solar PV system. So this was a really great project. They are completely off the grid now, right? The system was sized to provide 120% of the building's electricity use. And any incentives like Susan was talking about earlier, or any other incentives, whether it's from the federal government or the utility or any other programs, those all can be applied and go to the building owner just like they normally would. So it really doesn't matter how you're financing a project, whether it's CPACE or a traditional loan. Those incentives all go to the owner just like they normally would. Here's another example of a project in Boulder County. This was an owner that needed to replace their roof and their rooftop unit. So that was really the need, right? And they hadn't planned for that improvement. So they really didn't have the money to finance that project. So they ended up using a little under $300,000 in CPACE financing. And what this owner did is what a lot of owners we see doing, which is they said, okay, we need to replace the roof and the rooftop unit, but is there anything else on our bucket list? Anything else that we want to use CPACE funding for? And so in this case, they also included a 16 kilowatt solar PV system. They got new controls for the new rooftop unit. They replaced all the exterior lights. And they also did included electric vehicle charging stations. So you can see the 3 of them there on the left. So they rolled all of this into a project. So it was a really neat story because they took a negative, you know, we got to replace the roof and the rooftop units, and turned it into a real positive that they could include all these other improvements that they always wanted to do. In terms of project size, this was one of the smaller dollar projects that we financed. So this is Steve Ella. He's an organic farmer, and he used $60,000 in CPACE financing to install a 26 kilowatt solar PV system on his building. He also received a REAP grant, which he used that money he applied towards his business, and he received the federal tax credits like you normally would. So he financed the full amount of the project and then pocketed that additional grant and incentive money. Here's another case of a smaller building. This was a winery that used just under $65,000 in CPACE financing to install an 18.2 kilowatt solar PV system. In terms of larger projects, this is one of the larger projects that the program has been involved with. So this was just under a $7.2 million project. And again, this building, they needed new rooftop units. So that's what brought them to the program. And like I said earlier, what a lot of owners will do is they said, what else is on our bucket list? So they decided to also include an advanced metering system, retrofit the lighting that they hadn't retrofit before. They also replaced all the fixtures and put in a smart irrigation system. This building got LEED certification, LEED for existing buildings. So the cost for that certification effort, they also rolled in to the financing and financed it all together. On the new construction front, here's an example of one of the early projects that we did. This was out in Montrose. So this was David and Doug Dragoo. They own Mayfly Outdoors. So they manufacture fly fishing equipment. And they wanted to build a new manufacturing facility and headquarters. So they used $1 million in CPACE financing to help them build this new building. And that enabled them to include a lot of efficient design features, like very efficient HVAC equipment, an advanced control system, all different types of daylighting strategies, and LED lighting design, and even a heat recovery system. These owners too, they've recently used CPACE to fund 2 more buildings, new construction projects, and they have another one on the way. A lot of hotels are using CPACE financing as well for new construction. And here's an example right in Longmont. This was a building that went up not too long ago, new Hilton Garden Inn, and they used $1.6 million in CPACE financing to help build that hotel. A lot of gut rehab projects are also being financed through CPACE. So this is an example of a big box retail that had sat vacant for a while, and they used $1.7 million in CPACE financing to replace the windows and the skylights, replace all the HVAC equipment, install destratification fans, and to replace all the lighting. So we're seeing a lot of projects that are using CPACE for these, total rehabilitation projects. I mentioned nonprofits too. So here's an example of a nonprofit. This is the Forney Museum in Denver, and they use $62,000 in CPACE financing to finance a new lighting system. Here's another nonprofit, a senior center. They used $1.9 million in financing to completely renovate the chiller plant, all the HVAC equipment. They replaced all the exhaust fans, and they replaced all the lighting. So CPACE can be really a great fit for nonprofits. So to sort of sum up, CPACE can be very attractive to building owners. It was designed and developed to offer building owners a different way of financing their projects. And just to recap, the 3 things that make it different than other sources of financing is that it's 100% financing. There's no out-of-pocket. It's long-term financing, so you can finance these projects up to 25 years. And the payment obligation is transferable to a future owner. So it's sort of a next step. If you're a contractor, that's looking to develop projects that may use CPACE financing, you should get registered with our program. And so what that involves is you submit a contractor registration form and then attend one of our CPACE workshops, and that'll get you registered. You'll get listed on the website as a registered contractor. That way people can find you, and then you can begin originating and working on CPACE projects. And if you're a building owner or a developer that's looking to use CPACE financing, the first step is to send us a pre-qualification submission form. So both the contractor registration form and this form you can download off the program website. When we get this form from an owner or a developer, then we'll do a pre-screening, we'll schedule a kickoff call, and then we'll work with the owner and their contractors and anybody else involved to get the project financed. I'm going to stop there and turn to Bernice for any questions.
Thank you, Tracy, for sharing this insightful information. We have a couple of questions, and there is one in the chat that Francie was asking that in Longmont, as you know, part of Longmont belongs to Boulder County and the other part belongs to Weld County. And in the map that you show, it has some yellow X. Would you mind explaining what that means?
Yeah, so Boulder County, of course, like I said, is participating. And so any projects in that part of Longmont are eligible. Weld County is not participating. They've decided they do not want to be in the program. So yeah, if you're in Weld County, unfortunately, we can't work with you with regards to CPACE financing. I can tell you more about why Weld County is not participating in the program offline. So if you want to learn more about that, you can reach out. But unfortunately, yeah, Weld County's the only county currently that has decided they are not going to participate in the program.
Okay, thank you, Tracy. And I have another question. Do engineering studies include costs related to paying for the architect and plan reviews for new construction?
Yeah, for new construction, right, any of the soft costs. So if there's costs associated with the architecture or engineering design work, or even other soft costs like permitting or overhead and profit or contingency, all those costs can be rolled in. So when you're determining the 15 or 20% of new construction costs that CPACE can finance, all of those soft costs are added to the hard costs and rolled together.
Okay, thank you. We have another question. Does efficiency improvements in landscaping projects can be included in CPACE?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, anything with a utility cost saving, so anything that reduces your utility bill is eligible for financing. So with regards to landscaping, I showed that one case study. They put in a smart irrigation system, right? So that's a system that has sensors and is usually hooked up to the internet, so it can do sort of some predicting with regards to rainfall. And so, yeah, those types of systems, if they reduce the water use on the property, then the costs of that smart irrigation system or something along those lines are eligible for financing for sure.
Tracy, in Longmont, part of the utility bill includes, for some customers, includes broadband. I wonder if broadband will be included in CPACE.
Probably not. So the rule sort of goes like this. It's anything that's related to something that saves energy, you can include those costs, right? So like I mentioned earlier, if you have to do an electrical upgrade, you could say that's related to the new lighting improvement that you're doing. So that would be eligible. So if you're putting broadband into a building, you'd have to help me draw a line how it's related to some other improvement that you're doing on the building that's going to save on your utility bill. So we can get as creative as we want there, but I need to have, some reasoning how that's related to a utility cost saving improvement.
Okay, and just to clarify, it can also include water, right? Energy and water.
Yeah, right. It's any utility, right?
Okay.
Yeah, so it's right. Electricity, natural gas, water, anything that reduces those utility costs.
Okay, natural gas too. Perfect. Thank you for the clarification. And then we have a question from Hannah. She's asking, does the CO program specify any required energy modeling to prove savings? Hannah, do you want to elaborate more on that question?
Yes, I can. I can. I came from Illinois, and the PACE was enabled at the state level, but each county took their own, set their own ones up, and some counties by ordinance required energy modeling, which obviously added to the soft costs, but to show there'd be energy savings to qualify for the PACE financing.
Yeah, so in Colorado, right, we're a statewide program, so any county that's participating, it'll be the same anywhere you go in the county. And so for a existing building, to demonstrate the utility cost savings, you can really use any tool that you'd like. So you can use any energy modeling software or spreadsheet calculations, or like with solar, many of them will use PV watts or helioscope. So any of those are acceptable. That all gets reviewed by the program. So that analysis gets sent to the program, and then our engineering team will review the calculations, make sure the supporting documentation is there. Usually when we have our kickoff call, we'll discuss the approach that the project is going to use and make sure that we understand it and that it sounds like a good approach. But the general sort of rule of thumb is if you have multiple improvements, you would follow a level 1 ASHRAE energy audit. If you have more of a targeted improvement, like the good examples are a solar PV system or a lighting retrofit, then you don't have to do an energy audit of the entire building. You can just focus on that improvement, and your analysis can just dial in on that improvement as well. But in general, yeah, the program's pretty open to most energy modeling or savings calculation approaches. And then the last thing I'll mention, that EPIC tool that I talked about earlier, that's a calculation engine as well. So a lot of projects will use that tool to estimate the energy and cost savings for a project.
Okay, thank you, Tracy. And I have a question here. Does the applicant needs to have a good credit score to get accepted for the CPACE loan? Sorry.
Yeah, that's a great question too. So the underwriting will vary from project to project, but the primary piece that most capital providers look at is the building's financial health. So as long as you have a building that's worth a decent amount and isn't too encumbered in debt, so there's not, too big of a mortgage on it, then that tends to be a good candidate for CPACE and will satisfy most of the underwriting. Usually an owner's or a business's creditworthiness does not come into the equation. So most projects, yeah, they won't even take a look at that. If it is necessary, yeah, the capital provider may request that, but it's not typical. We don't usually see that.
Okay, thank you, Tracy. And other question, what are the typical terms of a CPACE assessment?
Yeah, the terms of the financing will vary because we have that pool of capital providers, the 40 different capital providers, they compete, right, to finance these projects. So their interest rates and their closing fees will vary. We're usually seeing interest rates anywhere from 5 to 6%, and that's a fixed interest rate throughout the term. The fees will vary too. They tend to be, I'd say, 1% of the finance amount. Other than that, yeah, the finance term can be up to 25 years. The average that we're seeing is about a 20-year finance term. So even though an owner can do it up to 25 years, sometimes they'll choose to do a shorter term just because financially it may look better, right? If they did a 20-year or a 15-year term or even a 10-year term. The other terms of the financing are pretty standard. They're the same for every project, so most of them are set. And you can download a copy of the financing agreement that's used for every project off of the CPACE website.
Sounds good. Thank you. Another question, how do I get approved for my CPACE financing?
Yeah, so let me go back one slide here. So this pre-qualification submission form, when we receive this, we'll do a pre-screening of your building to start, right? So we're going to take a look and make sure that the building is eligible. And we'll also take a look at the current mortgage on the building and its value and see if those seem to be in line with a successful CPACE project. So that's really the first step. Then as we work through the process, there's really two other major milestones in terms of getting approved. One is if there's a mortgage holder, we need to get consent from that mortgage holder, right, to allow the county to place the assessment on the property. So that mortgage holder consent is one piece. And then the other is the capital provider doing their underwriting, right? So like I said, usually that homework that we do in the beginning will set the project up to be successful through the underwriting. But once it's gotten through the underwriting, then we're good to go.
Thank you, Tracy. And I am curious because typically when you buy a house, after that, sometimes you can refinance your loan. Can you do something similar here with CPACE, or it doesn't apply?
Yeah, you can. So if a building owner or a developer does use CPACE financing, yeah, they can refinance their project at any time. And so usually an owner will want to do that if, you know, they can get better terms, right? So they may refinance to get a better interest rate. And so, yeah, you can do that at any time.
Okay, thank you. And we have another question from Hannah. She's asking, is the finance term tied to the life expectancy of the improvement or system, or in the case of a multiple system project, the longest life expectancy?
Yeah, Hannah, that's a great question. And right, so the recommended maximum finance term is tied to the estimated useful life of the equipment. And so when I say estimated useful life, it's the weighted average of the improvement. So what we'll do is we'll look at a cost weighted average and a savings weighted average of the estimated useful lives of all the improvements that are being included in the project. And then that'll be our recommendation as the maximum finance term. So, you know, it might be 19 years. So that's usually what a project will use as the finance term. But if the owner, the mortgage holder, and the capital provider all agree that they'd like to use a longer finance term than that recommended finance term, then that's fine. But they all just need to agree on that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Tracy. Another question, how do I repay my CPACE loan?
Yeah, so since it's an assessment on the property, it's tied to the property tax bill. So when an owner gets their property tax bill, and it's usually once a year or twice a year that they get their property tax bill, the CPACE assessment will be a new line item on that property tax bill. So it's not related to the property taxes, doesn't affect it in any way. It's essentially the CPACE payment obligation, that line item is piggybacking on the property tax bill. So when the owner gets their property tax bill, they'll make their CPACE payment along with their property tax payment. And just to follow the money, so when they make that payment, the CPACE payment goes to the county. The county then remits that payment to the program, and then we'll send it to the capital provider. So that's sort of how the money flows. That's why we need the county's support, the counties to participate, because they're sort of the mechanism that helps link that payment from the owner to the capital, to the program, and then to the capital provider.
Thank you, Tracy. And since we are in COVID and we're in an economic crisis, I was wondering if property owners can use stimulus funds or PPP loans to pay their monthly mortgages and things like that.
Yeah, well, so right, if a project gets funds, an owner gets funds from any outside source, they can apply. They can either use that money for whatever they want, or they could apply that to their CPACE payments, right? That's fine. So as I mentioned, the one project with Steve Ella, he received a REAP grant. We've had a number of projects that have received either USDA grants or REAP grants, and they can either use that to reduce the amount that they're going to finance. That's not one option. They can use the money, sort of put it aside to help make their CPACE payments. That's a second option. Or they can use that money for something else, right? So it's completely up to the owner how they apply those funds.
Thank you, Tracy. And you mentioned this in the slides, but maybe you can elaborate more about combining CPACE with utility rebates or tax incentives.
Yeah, so right, any tax incentives or rebates that you get, whether it's through a municipal program or a utility program or a county program, all that money goes toward the building owner, just like it normally would. So if you're getting a rebate from the utility, let's say, that money goes right to you. It doesn't affect or doesn't matter the fact that you're using CPACE financing. When we look at a project's economics, so we'll show the owner, okay, here's how much you're looking to finance, here's what the energy cost savings are going to be, and then we'll also list out any other sources of cash flow to the project. So things like incentives or other sources of capital that are coming in, and we'll include that in the financial report. So the owner will be able to look at that and say, okay, yeah, here's the cash flow coming in, here's what my payments are going to be each year, and so financially, this is what the project's going to look like to me. So that's a report we'll develop as part of this process, and we'll share with the owner, the mortgage holder, and the capital provider, so they're all looking at the same numbers and they understand financially what a project's going to look like.
Okay, thank you. And another question, how to connect with potential lenders?
Right, so actually, let me jump out of the slideshow for a second, and let me share with you this. Let me go to the program's website. So the website I've been mentioning is copace.com, and there's a list of capital providers on the website. So it's under the building owners section. It's also under the capital providers section. And so this directory lists all 40 of the capital providers that are currently in the program. So there's really two ways an owner or a developer can do this. They can either reach out to a capital provider themselves and say, hey, we'd like to have you finance this project for us through CPACE, or we can develop the project with the building owner or developer. And then once we know what the project's going to look like and how much they want to finance, then we're going to reach out to this pool of capital providers. And if they're interested, they'll submit term sheets for the owner to review. And then the owner can then select which capital provider they'd like to work with.
Okay, Tracy, I want to make sure that we include this in the chat and also in the follow-up email. And a last question, there is Senor Claudio, he's planning, to upgrade a bunch of food trucks and to put solar panels and efficiency appliances. Will his business qualify for CPACE, or is tied to a building?
Yeah, it's tied to the improvements on the building. So yeah, if he's looking to do, I think you mentioned panels, like solar panels on the building or other improvements to the building, those would be eligible. Anything like the new food trucks, those would not be eligible. But if there were infrastructure to support the new food trucks, like maybe he's going to do an all-electric fleet of trucks, and he needs electric vehicle charging stations for that, he could include the cost of the EV charging stations in with the project.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. I think that was the last question. I just, I don't know if someone else from the audience, Susan, Francie, Kathy, Hannah has to run. Well, baby, I am working. That's my daughter. Sorry about that. Francie, would you mind explaining our upcoming events, please?
Sure. So with Efficiency Works that Susan mentioned earlier is a rebate program and that is available to those who have Longmont as their utility provider. We have an event on June 17th that's all about water rebates. Efficiency Works has been primarily electrical rebates, but we're now expanding more and providing, actually by June 17th, we may have some more water rebates. So it's a great opportunity to learn about water rebates that are available in Longmont, as well as Fort Collins and Loveland. And then as well, the Sustainable Business Program has opportunities throughout the year. I believe in July 22nd, in partnership with Circle Graphics, there is going to be a webinar on how to start your sustainability team at your business. And so you can learn more about that at the Sustainable Business Program webpage. And if you're not already part of the program, I recommend it because you can learn more about events like these and opportunities and access to financing through the quarterly newsletter.
Thank you, Francie. And thank you, Tracy, for the great presentation today. And I'm going to send you a follow-up email to all of you with the next steps. And if you don't have any more remarks, Tracy, I will love to close the event.
Yep, no, that sounds good. Thanks, everybody, again. And I'm going to make this slide deck available to Berenice and the recording. So I'm sure if you want copies of those, you can reach out to her and she'll share them with you.
Perfect. And I will also CC Tracy on the email. And like this, you can have his contact information. Have a good evening, guys. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Bye.